Hello, I'm your host, David Barnard, and my guest today is Sherina, VP of Performance Marketing at Deezer. Sherina has been at Deezer for almost a decade, working across multiple marketing functions. On the podcast, I talk with Sherina about why performance marketing always hits a ceiling, how to think about and measure brand marketing, and why ignoring A/B test results can sometimes lead to better outcomes. Hey, Sherina, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hello, David. Thank you so much for receiving me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to chatting. I feel like I've been saying this more and more recently on the podcast, and we actually have a few episodes that will be released soon where I say a lot of people in the subscription app industry haven't heard of Deezer and don't realize what a big app it is, how long it's been around. There's kind of a lot of sleeper hits in the subscription app industry that aren't kind of like top of mind to folks. So I actually wanted to kick things off there. For our audience who might not be as familiar with Deezer, what is Deezer? Kind of give me a brief overview of what it does and maybe even a little bit of history of the app.
Yes, Deezer is it's a music streaming service. It was founded in 2007 by Daniel Marelli, basically a French developer and businessman in Paris, in his mother's kitchen. So it's really the classic startup story. At first, it was really a website, of course, in 2007. And then we built an app for iOS and then for Android. So now we're really cross-device. We have a very strong website and also very performing apps. Today, it's available in 100 and more countries, actually. But our strongest market is really France. It's our home market. So Deezer has an interesting history because it started with the downfall of CD sales in music industry. It was launched at a time where everybody downloaded MP3, basically. It slowly became an opportunity for the music industry to monetize through monthly subscription, as you know. So it's really the core of our monetization model, of our direct monetization model. It's really monthly subscription, but we are not owner of our content. So it means that a lot of this subscription money goes to royalties, to the labels and the recording companies. We also monetize through ads, but it's really very marginal compared to to the revenue we make from subscription. And we also developed a lot in direct monetization through bundles with partners like telcos, hardware, retailers. So we are present in the US actually through a deal with Sonos. We are also present in Latin America through a bundle with Mercado Libre, which is huge, absolutely huge there. And we are partnering a lot with telcos. That's really how we actually started.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And Spotify had just started in 2006. So Deezer is really one of the early pioneers in moving music to subscriptions and moving music online. As you said, like maybe a lot of folks listening to this podcast don't even remember back in 2007, 2006, and even before that of pirating MP3s and buying songs on iTunes and stuff like that. So yeah, Deezer's been around a long time and been a part of this kind of like wave. And while it's not as well known as Spotify, it's just an incredible business.
Yeah, indeed. It was at the heart of a big industry shift, actually. And Deezer learned monthly subscription models really on the go. I remember when I joined Deezer, it was in 2015. And I remember that back then there was major discussions within the product team and of course with the marketing team as well as to how far we should go into frustrating free users to get them to pay. Because really at first the model was a freemium. It was really based on the idea that ads could also support our business model. But the truth is that with ads alone, we'll never be profitable. So once we realized that, there was a big question of, okay, what do we do with all these free users who are enjoying our product but not paying, not profitable? And so we went very far into shutting down all the features and trying to frustrate a lot users. So it was a while ago, and settled down to, but in the end, degrading the user experience, the free user experience actually doesn't provide any good outcome, because all what you do is showing your free users that your product is absolutely not satisfying. on a free basis, and they would just leave and use another service.
Freemium is still somewhat underrated, especially now, a lot of subscription apps, my own included. Like I started using a hard paywall and forcing people to subscribe to my weather app because similar to Deezer, I have, high expenses with the weather data. And so there's been a lot of talk the last few years of subscription apps not offering freemium or like you said, degrading the experience. But to become a really big business, alienating those free users does kind of limit your pool. And like you said, push people to other apps. So it really depends on what kind of business you're trying to build and how you're trying to build it. But it's interesting to hear that y'all did push harder into subscriptions and then had to dial it back. I think that's kind of a lesson for a lot of folks as they do think about more strongly monetizing, is making sure that you do still have a valuable enough freemium experience to keep those users around.
Exactly. That's a very subtle exercise where you have to show your value for money, but that doesn't mean that your free product should be shit, basically.
Yeah. I mean, even to this day, how do you and Deezer consider that freemium experience as far as are ads working? I mean, do you monetize those freemium users enough, or is it kind of these subscriptions are kind of subsidizing those free users with the hope that over time more and more of those free users will upgrade?
No, we actually reworked a lot the free experience and the way we work with advertisers to actually be profitable on the free users. We keep really focusing on subscription to drive the majority of our revenue. And the way we see the freemium is more as a conversion tool, even though we did not crack it yet, to be honest.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is. We are actually doing the other way around now, is that we are opening more and more our product and our user experience to non-Deezer users. We want to encourage our users to share more with and really open the doors to also users from other streaming services.
Yeah. And then how does the partnerships, you mentioned partnering with telcos and partnering with other brands and stuff, how does that end up playing into that freemium experience? Are you able to do those partnerships actually help kind of subsidize the subscription to make it more affordable or even free via those telcos and others, where the user themselves aren't having to pay for that more premium experience? Or how do you work? Again, I think, a lot of apps who aren't at Deezer scale are maybe starting to think like, how do we grow and how do we better monetize for users? How do we make it more affordable or more accessible when we know just broadly across the economy, not everybody is going to pay for everything? How do these partnerships play into that?
Well, it's basically working on a bundle principle. So if I take, we have actually several types of deals. What we're doing when we work with a new partner is that we do things ad hoc. We tailor it to their business objectives, and we look for the place where it matches. So it's really about finding a win-win relationship. And it's true that for our partners, mainly bringing music to their clients, to their customers, it's bringing emotional connection. It brings a lot to their brand values. It also helps them connect better with the younger target audience. So that's really what we're working on. So for instance, one of our big partners is Mercado Libre in Latin America, as I mentioned. So Mercado Libre is a huge retailer in Latin America who built a bundle with Disney Plus for the video streaming and Deezer on the audio streaming parts. So on the user perspective, yes, of course, the idea of a bundle is indeed to have a better price as a package. And for us, it's really about retention.
Again, another thing, a lot of subscription apps, I think over time will find things like bundles to be very effective. Because as you said, it's really fascinating looking at the broadly across the subscription app industry and something like Amazon Prime. Amazon under Prime now has video streaming and music streaming, and like they've added more and more and more to these bundles in order to kind of provide that value. And while it does kind of lower maybe ARPU in some cases, you're also kind of expanding the pool of people who are then able to afford the product. So it kind of lowers the ceiling, but raises the floor, I think. And what I meant by that with lowering the ceiling and raising the floor is that, while your average revenue per user may go down in a bundle, you're raising the floor in that you're making it more affordable to more people. So even though you have a lower revenue per user, you're going to have more users actually paying. So it kind of raises that floor of getting more people into the app and paying, even if you're not making quite as much on an individual basis as you would if they subscribe directly.
That's really about the price elasticity, totally. And for us, partnering means an extended reach, obviously. So the mathematics are positive for us.
So the next part of that I wanted to dive into is that you do compete with some very large players in the market. You know, I already brought up Amazon Prime Bundle where people can get music. Now, Amazon Music is not to disparage Amazon, but it is kind of not something they seem to focus a lot on. You know, I don't think a lot of people use that as kind of their primary music streaming. But, you know, for folks who maybe can't afford or don't want to pay for music, but it seems like that's kind of a smaller part of their bundle. But then you have Apple Music, you have YouTube Music, you have Spotify Music. Deezer is competing globally against some very big players. And so what I think would be interesting to kind of dive into next is how you think as a performance marketer about the balance of brand marketing when you're going up against such strong brands, but then also kind of the performance marketing, which you're more focused on. Like, how do you think about that, especially in light of competing with these massive brands, established brands in the space?
That's a daily challenge. I don't think there are many app developers that are competing against so big competitors. When you think that Spotify is actually the smallest of all. And the way we see things, obviously, is that just as a philosophy to start with, we are the challenger. We can do what others can't. We don't have everyone focused at us. And we're small and agile. So to some extent, it's very challenging indeed, because we are maintaining the same product as a Spotify, an Apple, or an Amazon with maybe 20 times less developers than them. But we still keep up the pace. So of that, we are super, super proud. And we really think that being small is actually, it can be totally an asset, an advantage. And when it comes with partners, actually about partners, that's a big advantage for us, because we can really allocate a lot of resources to our partners, because partners they weight a lot in our revenue. So there would be a drop in the ocean of Spotify, and actually usually partners are looking to compete also against the big GAFAs, the giant of the web. So we know that it's an advantage. On a day-to-day basis, it is indeed very challenging, and not always on the very positive side, especially when we know that Amazon, Apple, to name them, they don't really, profitability is not an objective for them. So when we have Amazon buying our branded keywords on Google, they set the bidding so high, it's really hard for us to keep up the pace. But we still do, and I do believe that having to be profitable and having strong constraints actually make us more efficient and more smarter, basically. We are looking to get profitable in 2025. That's really something that we are working on as a company effort for quite some time now. Our ambition is really to become one of the first to be profitable in the music industry.
I can imagine that's pretty frustrating when you have a massive company like Amazon buying against your keywords, which then makes user acquisition even more challenging. But on a day-to-day basis, how do you think about allocating resources to kind of build the Deezer brand, but then also do performance marketing in a way? And as you said, as the competitor, as a more nimble company, you have to be more efficient and effective. So how do you think about that, balancing the performance marketing side versus the brand, and how do you kind of build both?
For me, performance marketing doesn't go without the brand. Yes, our competitors are so big that we can see it straight away, but I think that's at some point something that all apps encounter. When you focus purely and only on performance marketing, you hit very quickly a ceiling beyond which you cannot scale again. So yes, you will catch some low-hanging fruits. You activate 2 to 3 acquisition channels, and you will see indeed a user coming in, and they will be instantly profitable. And that's the beauty of performance marketing. But you won't go very far with that. And I really believe that the days where this was working are really over for the app industry, because it only worked in the app industry, maybe for the past 10 to 15 years and period. On any other industry, you have to work on your brand awareness, because that's the beginning of the funnel. And really, the conversion campaigns or the performance marketing that you do is at the bottom of the funnel. So for me, you cannot really perform in marketing if you lose track of the funnel. So brand marketing goes with performance marketing. It's just that, so you will work your brand on the upper funnel. And yes, it will be more challenging to measure. That's for sure. And it will be more challenging for you to convince your top management that you need to do it. So this, of course, I get, and that's, it's a daily issue that we all have to fix in performance marketing. But if you don't do that, your scaling up possibilities will be very quickly very limited. And I'm not even talking about retention here, because obviously also to retain your users, you do need to have a strong brand awareness and a strong brand preference, because you know that at any point your competitors will come to catch your users. So for me, it's indeed very important to have a very good balance between the two, and that's totally something that I think that at Deezer, I'm one of the best advocates for brand marketing, because we are on the first line, on the forefront to see when our action lose impact. We cannot go further than what we did because we focused too much on the very lower part of the funnel.
How do you define the difference between performance marketing and brand marketing? What would be some examples of brand marketing that you do that you consider brand versus performance?
So the main difference is really the objective and the KPI behind it. So an example of brand marketing activations that we have is currently we have this massive TV and out-of-home campaign live in France. All the campaign and all the messaging is really about enforcing the positioning of our brand. It's not talking about the price, about a trial period. It's not even encouraging you to download the app. It's more really about what it means to be a user of Deezer, basically.
Right. The vibe. Deezer is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so beyond Deezer being cool, which is obviously one of our brand value, as you can imagine, it's really about making very clear to our user and non-users that for Deezer, everything is about music and everything is about living the music. We are not positioned on all the audio. We are very centered around the music, and all our branding marketing is really around this core ID. We also want to put back the user at the core of our brand positioning. So it's also all about the user. It's all about you. As these activations, we don't expect to have immediate return on investment. Besides the fact that we are not able to measure, that's not even the point. As really, what we are using brand trackers, we are using post-tests. So we are really more on the quantitative studies, qualitative studies, to make sure that we do have a positive impact on our brand image, but we know that we won't get immediate revenue out of it. What we do, though, is on performance marketing, we are very focused on amplifying everything that the brand marketing team is doing to make sure that we do, the final little push, the little pinch for users, to make sure that users who are ready to convert will actually download our app and convert into paying sub.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people maybe underestimate about brand marketing, is that when people do have some level of affinity or understanding of the brand, then when you do hit them with that performance marketing can be way more efficient and effective because you've kind of like warmed them up as a lead. And to kind of backtrack a little bit, I do think it's interesting, Deezer's scale, you're talking about performance marketing not working anymore. I think a lot of people listening to podcasts would be like, wait a minute, our performance marketing is working great. But what they'll find, and kind of you alluded to, is that as they scale, they're going to find that performance marketing to become less and less and less effective. And then as that happens, that's where the brand marketing does start to come into play. And you do have to be at a certain size and have the finances to be able to spend in a way that isn't going to affect the bottom line immediately and measurably, but will then make your performance marketing more effective. And so this discussion is maybe, for the smaller apps to be thinking in the future, this is how we should be thinking about it. And then for the bigger apps that are already kind of hitting these boundaries, is that they really do need to figure out both sides of the equation.
Exactly. At first, it will work. At small scale, it will be super profitable and you will be super happy. But then it's very short term. So as soon as you have a bigger competitor, it's like we do have at Deezer, when you start fighting against an Amazon, for instance, and Amazon is a very good example, what do you have left if you don't have a brand? What do you have left to actually retain your user and to keep acquiring new ones? All you have is emotional connections that you manage to build with your brand. And this is not something that's, it's an actual expertise to know how to position your brand well, target your audience well, understand very well your users. It's really about art and science. It's about how you do business while being more understanding your users.
Let's talk about the science part of that a little bit, though. How do you measure? You kind of mentioned a little bit like qualitative measurement and doing user panels and things like that. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like you mentioned, you do have KPIs around brand marketing. So then why don't we kind of talk through both the measurement of the performance marketing side of things and the measurement of the brand marketing side, and kind of how you maintain both at the same time, to even on the brand side, making sure that you're not overspending or being wasteful in that spending. And then how do you measure the performance marketing piece and then account for the brand marketing in that?
That's one of my most favorite topics, because there's no black and white answer to this question. For me, everything became even more complicated with all the privacy rules. So we cannot track everything we want anymore. On the app side, you cannot even get anything before the last touch point. So when you think about that, it leaves you with pretty much no direct tools to measure the impact of your branding campaigns. For me now, measurement is really about multiplying the source of truth. You have to use different methodologies, different techniques to measure different KPIs and make sure that they all align and they all point to the same conclusions, which you want to be. You're going in the right direction, basically. So the way we do it at Deezer is that we do use many different ways to measure. On the brand marketing side, we are very much measuring the trend of our paid consideration towards our users through quantitative studies. So it means that every quarter, every semester, we ask a panel of our audience how they feel about does Deezer knows music? Does Deezer understand me? Do I feel close to Deezer? And we especially focus on the paid consideration part, which is basically, am I considering paying for Deezer? So that's what's actually reliable on that is that we follow the trend. So maybe it does not measure super precisely the actual level of paid consideration, but what we want to see is an upward trend. That's also what we are doing in terms of performance marketing. We follow the same pattern. So we do have last click attribution. We are working on a multi-touch attribution model, but we know that it will somehow be biased because of the different ways you track on web versus app. And as you know, we cross-device, so we do have a lot more data on a web journey than on an app journey. We also use incrementality testing. So we do as many incrementality tests as possible to validate our assumptions. And as part of the incrementality tests, we also try to figure out what is the right level of investment on the digital upper funnel campaigns, so campaigns that will drive installs or campaigns that will be much more about really reach and frequency. How do these impact our performance campaign? So these are stuff that you can actually do very easily with a conversion lift study through Meta, among other partners. And we have the MMM, which is more of a statistic model. So it's not fully functional at Deezer, not fully satisfying, but this is still something that we are working on to keep the pace of what's really being done in the measurement part at the moment. So my main goal, actually, my main focus is to make sure that we always one step ahead in terms of measurement. For me, measurement is everything. If you cannot measure what you do, all your efforts are a waste. You have no idea what you're doing. So yeah, my next steps really on the measurement side is to use the results of incrementality tests to apply some scores into our MMM. You know, once you validated your assumptions, it's not super scientific, but you can work with these assumptions and end up with a sort of a golden book where you know exactly, precisely what worked, what doesn't work.
I think some of our audience, and when you said MM, I was expecting you to then say MMP, Mobile Measurement Partner, which I know a lot of folks, I think fewer folks will be familiar with the idea of media mix modeling. Can you explain that? And then is that all done in-house, or is there a tool that you use for media mix modeling?
Yeah, so media mix modeling is, it goes beyond tracking and attribution. So MMPs for us, like they are vital. We could not work without MMP. But as I mentioned with privacy, it's become very limited. So you can understand your last touch point, but you cannot understand anything else. Media mix modeling, their objective is really to help you understand the impact of any parameters to your business. So it can also be competitors' activations, competitors' offers, but it's mainly used indeed as make it obvious. It's really about your media mix. So it helps you measure the impact of offline media, such as TV, out of home, print, and it can also help you understand the impact of your digital brand campaigns. You know, those that you do on YouTube that nobody can really measure, but we all know that it works. So to go beyond attribution, media mix modeling is really about building a statistic model, comparing your spend versus your daily or weekly incoming traffic, to outline actually the variations. And also to define a baseline. But it's not perfect because ideally for me, in my dream world, an MMM would be able to tell me what will happen if I stop investing on anything. We all know that, yes, we do have a baseline, but if we stop investing on it, the baseline will decrease. And yet, weirdly, on MMM, your baseline is always flat. It's not perfect. You cannot base all your decisions on an MMM, unfortunately. That's why, for me, having multiple sources of truth is key. You validate your assumptions again and again, the most informed decisions that you can.
And is your media mix model all done internally? Do you have a whole team dedicated to that? Or is it a few people in the kind of, I imagine you kind of have a marketing engineering or a growth engineering team. Is that mostly done internally, or are there any specific tools that you use to help with that?
Yes, the answer is we do everything internally. We have an amazing data science team that spend time on building those MMMs and improving them. We work definitely super well with the data team to improve it. To me, I would not say that doing it in-house is the best setup for two reasons. The first one is that, okay, maybe those data scientists that you have internally, maybe they would be better working on your product algorithm, for instance, on some maybe more product-related missions. And the second aspect is that what I find maybe lacking a little bit is that when you work with an external company, they've seen so many different company problematics and challenges, and they are 100% open to what's happening outside. So they will be able to feed you with the best solutions for your own challenge. So that's still an open question. We do it in-house, but it's something that I work on for 2025. Maybe about that, the best setup would be to have a hybrid of internal and external, because indeed, internally, you will have all the essence or the knowledge of what's happening in the company and in your industry. If you outsource a little bit of that, if you take an external consultant to audit what you're doing and make some recommendation coming from outside, that might be a good win.
You mentioned that part of the challenge of media mix modeling is that you don't necessarily get precision in understanding what changes will directly impact the overall profitability of spend. But then you had mentioned before that you layer on incrementality testing. So how do you use incrementality testing in combination with media mix modeling to better kind of be able to understand and predict which parts of your marketing spend are working and which parts are maybe less efficient?
So the idea behind it, and that's really something that's done by companies like L'Oréal. It's my top of mind company, but when I heard that they did that, I was like, okay, I absolutely need to do that too. So the concept behind it is that through incrementality testing, you are able to calculate sort of a score between what you actually see as direct tracked data and what was more hidden, you know? It's usually, it can be on both ways. Maybe you do attribute more directly to certain channels than what they actually contribute, like for instance, search, to say it, that's a very basic example. And maybe you do under-attribute to other channels that come earlier in the funnel, like social ads. So you can, with incremental testing, estimate a score and use that score to modify your statistic model your media mix modeling.
So in your incrementality testing, are you completely shutting off specific channels or like how do you actually do the incrementality testing?
I think really incrementality testing, they are at a level where you need to be well, either you have an excellent agency to get you on track, you do lots and lots of trainings, but basically on incrementality testing, there are different methods depending on what you want to check and with which partner. So one of them is a geolift, and geolift is really about shutting down some regions and comparing them to not shut down regions. But the regions have to be similar. And there are tools on Google that help you do that on Google Ads. Yeah, and when you shut down, you can see, you can calculate the increment. But there are many other ways of doing incrementality testing. Like, as I mentioned, conversion lift study, brand lift study, where you have a controlled group and an exposed group, and you can measure the uplift between the two.
We're getting super in the weeds, which is a ton of fun because we don't always get to do this on the podcast. But I think this can be really helpful for folks to be thinking about this. And again, there aren't that many companies at Deezer's scale doing this, but the companies that are on their way toward Deezer's scale should be thinking about these things. And so I think it's super fascinating. And so just a couple more questions on that front. Would you also potentially switch off specific types? So like maybe you don't actually cut all YouTube ads, but you withhold a certain type of brand marketing and keep the other brand marketing. Like what other kind of ways do you use incrementality testing to understand the performance?
So on brand marketing, you have to keep one thing in mind. Brand marketing is not a short-term impact. So switching it on, switching it off, if you expect to see a difference between the two, I don't believe in it. Because you compared to, for instance, you work with an ad network and you're not really sure that the ad network actually provides on the conversion side, then switching it off and on, you will see the impact. You will see it straight away because it's a short-term channel. But whenever it's long-term, you have to be a bit smarter than just switching off and see what happens, because the actual impact can happen maybe next year or in 2 years. You don't know that. It can be a very slow decrease, but still also very consistent and hard to reverse.
Yeah. Well, my last question there then is, have there been any especially interesting results from the incrementality testing? So, have you done a test where you removed a channel and wow, like things just drop like a rock? Or and the opposite, have there been channels where you drop them off and like you just don't see a difference at all? Any kind of surprising results to the positive or negative in some of your incrementality testing?
Actually, it validated more assumptions that we already had, and the surprise was to which extent it was. So I would say that all the campaigns that we do that are more upper funnel, like campaign that will optimize based on installs and not necessarily paying subs, we knew that it had an impact that was not so easy to measure on our performance campaign, but we did not imagine how much. So it really confirmed the absolute necessity to keep investing on upper funnel campaigns, even though they won't have a short-term impact. What's really interesting with incrementality testing is that it actually validates the fact that all the more conversion campaigns that you have, they only amplify what exists already. They don't create anything as such. So that's again the brand marketing versus performance marketing debate. But yeah, performance marketing does only amplify what has already started way earlier in the funnel.
Yeah. Again, just so fascinating and fun to have somebody like you on the podcast who works day in, day out, having to make this work. And like you said, these are pushing toward profitability in 2025. These are the steps that you take to make that happen. And so it's really great to get this level of insight from you on how that all works at the scale of Deezer. I did want to shift gears and talk a little bit about Deezer's approach to experimentation and testing, because I think you have a lot of really interesting ideas there.
One thing that I'm absolutely fundamentally convinced of is that nothing can be done in performance marketing if you don't innovate, if you don't test everything that you can test. It's really, and that's also why I really love this job. You have to be curious, you have to be daring, and you have to not be afraid of failing. you only invest only in the most secure campaigns, towards the most secure audience and the most secure channels, the whole relevance of what you do will fall, either in terms of volume, in terms of cost, or in terms of quality. You will once again hit very quickly a ceiling if you don't get out of your comfort zone and go test some stuff. So that's why I also insist a lot towards my team. You know, in France, we have culturally, we are not raised to test and fail. We have this belief that we need to succeed straight ahead, like at the first try. And if we are not sure that we'll succeed, well, better not try. So it's a lot of education to do, I would say, of company values to infuse, of same speech to repeat, to say, no, actually, I will never reproach anyone in my team to have failed at something. What would be a problem for me is people who don't try. So what I really expect from my team is that they do test a lot. They have to be very honest of the results, of course, and not be afraid to say, okay, I tested that and it failed. And that's fine. I mean, the main question is, what are the learnings? Learnings are so valuable that, yes, it requires sometimes to sacrifice a little bit of budget, take a little bit of risk. Because in the end, what happens when we do the math at the end of the year and we look at everything we tried, all the biggest fails that we had versus all the biggest wins, what we see is that wins always compensate for fails. I think that's also why we've been so successful in the past years in performance marketing. I don't like to brag, but we did improve our LTV SAC. We more than doubled it in 2 years' time, while scaling up on volumes at the same time. So pretty incredible. And for me, there are, of course, many reasons, and it's also a company effort. It was also because we collaborate very well with other teams, and we're all looking in the same direction. But the main factor that helped us really scale while improving our profitability is all the tests that we ran. And I'm really, really very proud of my team. Like, they test stuff that I would have never dared to test when I was younger.
That's such a fascinating topic from like a leadership perspective, that as a team, you're spending a lot of money, and a failed test, while not completely failed, like if you spent $50,000 in a new ad campaign and it performed half as well as another ad campaign, you're not necessarily losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you're still getting some level of performance, but you are losing money in that you could have potentially put that budget behind another ad that was performing or another channel that was performing. So how do you instill that in a practical level inside a team that you may inefficiently spend a considerable amount of money, which, I mean, just as a human, it's hard to kind of reconcile that and like go to work the next day and be like, oh man, I just wasted money. And then how do you put kind of guardrails against that as well, to where, you aren't going to lose hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in these experiments?
First of all, we do frame our test very well. The risk-taking is actually quite limited. If you look at the big picture, if you look at the overall, and that's really what I encourage the team to do, is to look at the overall LTV SAC. As long as overall we are profitable, it's okay to test stuff and indeed lose money. So if you look at it in an isolated way, yes, it's money. We would have loved to spend it better, but rather than looking behind, it's more about looking ahead and get the valuable learnings that would make the next test actually overperform and compensate for the loss.
And then how do you incorporate gut feeling versus raw data into making some of these decisions, where maybe sometimes something appears to be underperforming, but you just feel like it actually is the right thing to do?
It's being data-driven, as you can have understand now, is really key for me. So data is at the heart of everything. Measurement is at the heart of everything. But at some point, there are stuff as a marketer that deep down you know. And when the data is not showing it, you should definitely, to me, still listen to your gut feeling and do it anyway and see what happens. And I do have an excellent example on that. We had this homepage last year, our unlocked homepage, that in terms of design, in terms of clarity, nobody was really satisfied with. We developed 2 alternative versions, in which I think all of us really believed that one of these 2 will overperform. So we would say more of a branding unlock homepage with key messages around our brand and our product, And there was more of a player looking like unlocked homepage. So a player, but unlocked and obviously with features that are very limited and encourage you to subscribe whenever you wanted to stream a song, basically. So we ABC tested these pages against each other, and none of the alternative versions won against the control version. And so, yes, that's the moment I think that we all agreed to listen to our gut feeling, which was, okay, in all case, the control version was not satisfying to us. It was not conveying the messages that we wanted to convey, and it was not user-friendly at all. So based on that, we made the decision to go live with a branded version. Also, we implemented it, we rolled it out. Now that we did, a few weeks after, we see positive results compared to the old version. So that was one of the examples where we are actually right to listen to our gut feeling.
I think the key there is user centricity. It's like that you're doing what is best for the user. And I think a lot of marketers, and we see this broadly throughout the industry, a really kind of annoying example is the gaming ads, where the gaming ad is completely fake. The game itself doesn't actually do anything that was, shown in the ad, but those ads perform. But then people get into the game and they're confused, and that's just like a really blatant example of not being user-centric, where you can do things in marketing that quote unquote work, or that, the data shows works, but you're not, to kind of the point of this whole conversation, you're not building a brand. You're not doing something that like makes the users feel good about playing that game, even if it did actually convert better than an ad that did show the actual game. So how do you think about that user centricity and how that kind of permeates marketing and product and throughout the entire user journey? And that was a perfect example of it, is a homepage that as a marketing team, you felt put the user at the core. Even if it didn't immediately A/B test better, over the long haul, putting the user at the center did make a difference, and it showed over time, which again, that's the hard part about being data focused as well, is that sometimes you're fooled by your A/B test, because in whatever specific timing or external factors or other things that you can't even account for in an A/B test led you one direction, but it was actually the wrong direction in the long term. So how do you think about that user centricity and how to apply that and those gut perspective to making those decisions?
User centricity, I think, is really a game changer when you shift your mindset as a company towards listening to your users and stop think that you are part of the users and that your personal opinion does matter a lot because you use your product. And B, that everything will come from product features, the product-led growth, which does not take into account really the needs of the user. For me, the shift really means that you equip yourself to listen to your user, ask them the right question and listen to them all the time, and actually kind of delegates some of the decision-making. Good example is when we changed our logo. So before 2023, we had an equalizer as a logo. It was our logo ever since our creation. So from 2007 until 2023, we had the equalizer as a logo. We knew that we needed to change for different kind of reasons, but we knew that we had this big problem of brand attribution. Somehow our logo didn't seem to be recognized very well, which is surprising when you know that it was so, it was there for since forever. And so we decided to change it, but we did not decide to change it just because we were convinced that it was needed. We decided to change it because we asked our users. We asked them to draw our current logo to see if they were able to draw it. We also tested our existing logo against two alternate versions. And we were like, this is not a personal opinion. So we had this, now our logo is a purple heart. So a big change, huh? Really internally, it was a big change to go from a very tech equalizer to a purple heart, which is much more into the emotion, connecting emotions with our users. So nobody really believed that the purple heart would be the winning version because it was so disruptive and maybe looking more like a dating app, stuff like that. But it actually, what came out of the studies was that it was a winning version. And it was a winning version by far. And it was a winning version on all target audience and through all KPIs. And for me, that's the example of user centricity. Like we listened to the users and we implemented, we made decisions based on it. And what we see really, all our signals is that it was the right decision to make. Ever since, I also believe strongly that it really helped my performance campaign to be, again, more profitable while scaling up. So yeah, user centricity should be at the heart of any marketing, actually.
Well, I think that's a fantastic place to wrap up this conversation is that, and again, I think in a world of A/B test this and that and use every dark pattern you possibly can to encourage people to subscribe in the first couple of minutes, a lot of that works. And sometimes you use some of those tactics to get to the profitability level you need to get to. But in the long run, what wins is providing a really good experience and a good feeling to the users. So I think it's a fantastic place to wrap up. And then even especially, throughout this entire conversation about brand and performance and the combination of the two, the fact that listening to users and being user-centric, even so far as changing your logo, then actually increased performance on performance marketing is just fascinating. So thank you so much for all these insights. Anything you want to share as we're wrapping up? We're going to include links to your LinkedIn, and I know Deezer is hiring, so we're going to link to the job page as well. But anything else you wanted to share as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, we covered everything. Thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. I mean, these are questions that I'm always happy to have a follow-up on. So I would be super happy to connect with anyone interested in measurement, especially, so we can share experiences.
Don't sleep on those the job links. Paris is an incredible city, and Deezer is not remote, right? So it's pretty much everybody. All the job listings I saw were Paris specific. So if you work in mobile marketing and want a cool job in a cool city, go check out the Deezer jobs page. Just talking to you for the last hour, it sounds like it's a fantastic place to work and really doing some cutting edge things in marketing and, being the underdog and kind of getting to fight against the bigger players in the space. So I think it's a really cool company and a really cool opportunity for folks.
Yes, definitely. So if you want to move in Paris, Deezer should definitely be on the list of companies you apply to. We do have several jobs opening at the moment, and obviously there will be many opportunities in the future. At the moment, we are looking for a senior SEO manager, by the way. So if you're interested, you can apply on our Deezer jobs board and also reach out directly to me. Voilà. And la vie à Paris is so wonderful. So,
all right. Thank you so much, Sherina, for joining me. This is a fascinating conversation.
Thank you, David.
Thanks so much for listening. If you have a minute, please leave a review in your favorite podcast player. You can also stop by chat.subclub.com to join our private community.